You know, if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. One of my very favorite things on the planet is to build things with friends. You ever meet somebody and then just immediately know that you're going to be friends? Just like immediately. Just one of those things where you're like, oh, we're the same person.
Don't mind me. Nope. Yeah, yep, there it is. Keep it going.
We are in our 30s. In case anybody's wondering.
A brother from another mother, a sister from another mister, whatever, however you want to phrase it. My good friend Sam, we've been meaning to do another build together for like 4 years maybe, and we just haven't had the time, and so we decided that now is the time to make time.
What did you say?
That's a way to phrase that. I promise that made sense in my head more than it did when it came out of my mouth. And so, I think it's time to take a field trip up to Sam's.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know Eric, how do you not know Eric? Go turn on Netflix. The dude's face is
It's not really on Netflix anymore. This is Sam. You may know her better by her pseudonym, DIY Huntress. But what you might not know about Sam is that she's actually basically me if I was a feisty 5'0" Italian woman from Long Island. Which feels like it could have actually happened in another branch of the multiverse.
Let's just do the thing.
Let's just do the thing. Let's see if this thing comes out of the mold.
Oh my Jesus.
Wish us luck on this entire project.
So before we dive into this project, I want to give you just a little bit of background as to where this idea came from. See this? I'm doing all the work. She's just on the phone the whole time.
I don't see what the issue is. I don't understand the problem. Isn't this why I hired you?
See, when Sam and I decided we were going to do a project together, she said, "Great, I think I'm going to surprise you with something."
Meant to do that.
I had no idea what that surprise was until I got there and found out we got an epoxy pour. Now, I don't want to sound dismissive at all. If you want to do epoxy pours, do them. I've certainly done my fair share in the past, but from a design perspective, they create an interesting challenge because, firstly, you're immediately dealing with a mixed media. In this case, we're dealing with wood and polymer, and then you're also dealing with multiple colors and textures. We have these beautiful flamed or figured birch cutoffs that are now encased in a black epoxy. And the question from my perspective as a designer is, how do you create an object that highlights the beauty of that material and also has all of the functionality that Sam is looking for, in this case, this 90-degree corner desk?
Don't tell Eric, but so my eBay is DIY Huntress, and I'm going to be starting the bid at least 6 cents for this.
Don't tell Sam, but when we do the skim coat for the epoxy, I'm actually going to epoxy this to the underside of the table. So as we sat with this idea for 20 or 30 minutes and developed it further, it became clear what we were going to do. We were going to make a plywood cabinet 72 inches long by 24 inches tall. This would be big enough to give her some real storage in her upstairs office, but small enough that we could get it up the stairs and actually put it in place. We decided to miter the corners to give it a little bit of visual interest, and we decided to put a door and a drawer on it to break up the monotony of those open shelves. We decided to keep the door and the drawer black not only to match the epoxy, which was going to create that L, but also to give the cabinet a little bit of visual weight to balance out the visual heaviness of the epoxy table on the other side. So the only thing left to figure out really was how we were going to get 2 videos out of this project. Luckily, we had already had that conversation.
Oh my god, I have no idea how we're gonna pull this off. I better give Sam a call.
Great googly moogly, what does this guy want now? Go for Sam.
Hey, Sam! Samadre, Samuel, how you doing, buddy?
Samwell? Are we bringing back Samwell?
No, don't worry about that. Listen, how are we gonna get 2 videos out of this build together?
Oh, dude, I've already got that covered. Check this. I do the cabinet build video, and you do like 10 tips and tricks for woodworkers and DIYers and small shops.
Dopalicious, dude. I love that idea. Let's make it happen.
Dude, you're so old.
Well, with that unnecessary pot shot out of the way, why don't we get to the show? 10 tips and tricks for cabinet makers and DIYers in small shops.
Dopalicious.
All right. So, I love the airplane.
Always.
The airplane.
Every time.
All right. Despite the airplane. Tip number 1. We'll talk about ripping longboards, specifically sheet goods at the table saw. So, what I've been doing for years is what I learned to do in cabinet shops when you're breaking down large material. These were the days before we had track saws and could get accurate cuts on a flat surface. We would take it to the table saw. You stand it up on the far left-hand side, and you watch the line against the fence. You don't, now this might be taken as an unsafe thing to do, so don't hear it that way, but you don't pay attention to the blade. You know where the blade is, don't cut your hand off. But you watch the line on the fence rather than the line on the blade to make sure that your material is being registered against the fence the entire time. So I'm picking up on the back left corner, and I'm essentially walking it through the cut, watching the fence the entire time, and that ensures that I have an even cut on the back side. Now, this is always going to be a double cut situation. You make your first rip, you cut it down to rough size, and then you take maybe about 1/4 of an inch off the other end in order to remove 1 factory edge and 2 any inconsistencies in that face. But that's the simplest way to break down a large sheet good.
We can show them because I'm short.
We can show them!
See, short people can have shops too. You just gotta agree.
Tip number 3. When you are going to biscuit together a miter joint, make sure that your biscuits are not too low in that miter. You're gonna have to set the height of the cutter a little bit up because remember, you're coming through at an angle, and if your miter is too low, you're gonna blow through. Can you see that? Yeah, you can see that right here. You're gonna blow through the back face of your material or your show face, which is not what you want. So make sure that that miter is up a little bit. Now, as far as placing goes, I have a habit of always measuring in from the outside. The closest you ever want to put a full width biscuit is 2 inches in from the end. I usually sneak it into 3 if I can. In this case, these pieces are 15 3/4 wide. So I'm going 3 inches in from either end and then right in the middle, which is going to be at 7 7/8. Because if there are any pieces that are ever so slightly different, I know my biscuits are still going to end up 3 inches in from the outside and then dent in the center. So that's what I do. Tip number, what number are we on? 6?
Why are you asking me?
I think we're on tip 6. Tip number 6, when you are cutting your biscuits on 2 perpendicular surfaces, use the same reference edge for the biscuit joiner. So I love when the dust bag is open.
Stop making a mess in my workshop.
So when you use the same reference edge, what happens is I'm going to use the bottom when I'm cutting this surface. So I'm going to butt up against the stop and plunge. And then when I go to cut the mating surface, if I then try to shift and use this fence, it might not be that accurate. So if I can, what I'm going to do is use the bottom edge here, butt right up to my line, and make my plunge. And that way I know the distance here and the distance to the center of my board is exactly the same. So that's how we do it. Let's make some cuts. Bada boom. Bippity boppity boop.
Look at that.
Look, forget about it. You gotta throw in at least one forget about it when you're on long hours. Forget about it. All right, tip number. Do you have any idea what tip number we're on?
I think we're on like 6.9.
All right, tip number 69. Sometimes the more efficient way to cut a slot for a biscuit is not to actually use the biscuit joiner. Now, this may look sketchy, and I admit that's because it is. But it happens in cabinet shops all the time. Instead of taking the biscuit joiner to the piece and making a series of plunge cuts, you take the piece, if it's small enough, to the table saw and you make a pair of rip cuts. And then you essentially have a slot to place the biscuits in anywhere along the length. So, once you have that cut, then I can just plunge a couple of biscuits in the mating piece wherever, and it doesn't matter because these pieces are perfectly centered and lined up. The key to this trick is to make sure you take a cut off of both faces. So if this biscuit slot is misaligned in one direction or the other, you're evening that off. You're evening that out by taking a cut off of both faces. So you know that slot is in the middle. If you get your biscuits in there, bada bing, bada boom. It's faster once you have this set up. If I've got 25 pieces to cut biscuits in, rather than setting each piece up, making your measurements, and cutting with the biscuit, it's faster. Just set the table saw up once and make your rib cuts. All right, day 2 is underway. Yesterday, we got a lot done, despite what some people are trying to say.
I mean, we didn't get that much done.
So much done. All of the things done. The cabinet is dry fit. It looks good. Everything's lining up. We have to take it apart, sand it, and then we'll glue it together. And then we can start making some of the internal components while the glue is drying. All right, tips D, E, and F. Here we go. First and foremost, the sanding direction. When you are sanding a piece of wood or a piece of plywood, generally speaking, I sand across the grain all the way down the piece first, and then I sand along the grain second. That way, you cover the entire area. You're not leaving any kind of low spots that you missed by just sanding in one direction. Tip number Q is when you are sanding around the edges, never overhang the sander by more than about 30 to 40%, because if you do that, you're gonna end up rotating the sander down and probably rounding over those edges. So if you're trying to keep nice, crisp lines, never overhang it more than around 30%. And tip number 3, removing pencil lines. When you have an exposed surface that people are going to see, obviously you want to get all of those pencil lines off of there. However, when you are sanding a surface that is going to be joined together, in this case, these biscuits are all going to be behind a shelf, I'm not going to worry about removing the pencil line because nobody's ever, or I hope nobody's ever going to see it once the thing is glued up. You're going to know and you're going to lose sleep, and that's fine because it doesn't exist in my house. So, joinery surfaces, don't worry about them being highly polished. That is okay. Now we're going to keep sanding. Triple tip. Oh, don't get that.
And then he's gonna break his camera.
Yep.
And then,
Damn right.
guys, let's raise money for Eric's new camera
Let's
by
just-
auctioning this off.
Hey guys, let's just raise money for Eric. Let's just do that. Tip number 72, doing a 3-stage glue up. When you do a large glue up like this, getting all of the components glued and clamped up simultaneously can be very difficult, especially when you're using the glue with a shallow open time like a Titebond 1. You've really only got about 10 minutes of work time. So you can approach this in multiple stages. You don't have to glue the entire cabinet up at once. The first thing we are going to do is we're going to glue up the center bay, and then we are going to work on one wing, and then we're going to work on the other wing. So that'll probably be somewhere in the range of about 15 minutes a piece. We'll give it 10-15 minutes to kind of dry a little bit in between, just enough to tack up where it's sturdy, and then we can keep working back and forth. That way we can make sure all of our joints align and look good, and we're not absolutely flying through a glue up and being sloppy and rushed. So 3-stage glue ups, tip number 72, let's go. Sorry, what was that, Sam?
You can use pocket holes, but only... Wait, get out of my way. Friends, listen. Pocket holes are not your enemy. They're not. They're great. However, use pocket holes only when you can hide them so no one knows that you use them.
Not 14 seconds ago, she was like, pocket holes are the greatest. I'm loud and proud with my pocket hole fandom.
I love pocket holes.
This is the type of manipulation and gaslighting that I'm talking about here.
Tip number 81. If you want to use pocket holes, that's great. We love them. They're amazing applications, but hide them. Don't tell anyone you use them. Hide them.
See, in this, listen, this is me to you. This is a promise. If ever I use pocket holes, you will know that I use pocket holes because I won't try to hide them like some people over here.
You can leave now.
I rest my case. You know what, guys? Listen, I learned something today. I came into this day thinking that pocket holes were just a beautiful decorative joint, and I learned.
Who says that?
I learned
No one says that.
I learned the error of my ways, and I would just like to repent and apologize to the pocket hole community for not knowing better. I will be better from here on out, and I hope you guys can forgive me. And that's all. Okay, bye.
Hashtag hide your
Hashtag me
pocket.
too.
Hashtag hide your pocket holes.
Hashtag.
Don't lift with your back.
Tip number 97, lift with the back in a jerking, twisting motion. It's good for the lower lumbar.
It's really bad for your mental health, but okay. I like that little feature up top. The little design.
You like that?
Yeah, I'm into it.
Need a little pop of color.
I like that little pop. That kind of looks cool.
I'm not gonna lie, that looks dope.
Whoa.
Hell yeah. Now, the final tip for today is going to be shellac. Don't sleep on shellac. Shellac is a universal sealant. It is a fantastic finish in and of itself, and it can be applied over almost any surface. So what we have here is the epoxy pour, and we sanded it back to, what did we go to, 400?
We did 220 for the wood.
We went to 220 for the wood.
400 for the epoxy.
400 for the epoxy. We looked, it looked good, but top coat that we were applying, we weren't really satisfied with the finish that we were getting off of it, so we decided to spray shellac to fill in any of the inconsistencies. And Sam, what do you think?
It looks good.
It looks good.
She looked good.
She looked good though. So the other nice thing about shellac is that it's going to dry in about 10 to 20 minutes, depending on if you are mixing it up by hand, how heavy your cut is, or if you're just using the store-bought spray shellac, which is more than fine for 99% of the applications that you're going to do. So we're going to give this about 10-15 minutes. She's going to look beautiful, and then we're going to assemble this cabinet.
Let's go!
Woo!
Woo!
Well, I think we can objectively say that that was chaos. All right. We're just catching an Uber home. All right, we'll get there. We'll text you when we get home. Hey, man, how you doing today?
Good, how are you?
Doing just fine, thank you.
Long time.
I know. We're just headed home right now after a long evening. Right here's good, man.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, brother. Appreciate you. Hey, drive safe, okay? All right. Hey, we got home safe, guys. All right. Be good. See you later. It's been real. You guys, what happened, guys?
That was the best Uber ever.
I'll tell you one thing. Morteza is a gentleman and a scholar, okay? Well, guys, it's been a delightful bill. We'll see you next week. That was utter absurdity, and I regret nothing. I will tell you this. I still haven't edited this video, so I don't know how it's going to turn out. And it may be absolute nonsense. And Isabel, my editor, I'm so sorry you had to sit through that and deal with that. But hey.
I did it.
I think it's really important for the creative process and to just be humans in general to go be stupid with your friends.
like to just have a good time, to do a thing that you enjoy doing, that you have in common. And for Sam and I, it's building things. And we had a blast. Like we did not stop laughing and being idiots for 72 hours. And it took a toll on our hydration levels, I can tell you that much. But it was wonderful. So, and I hope that came across on screen. I hope you learned something. I hope that it was enjoyable to watch me work with another person and do a thing, because it's also, I think, creatively important to challenge yourself, to be in new spaces, to work in different locations than what you're used to, get out of your comfort zone and do things that you don't normally do. I don't normally do epoxy pours. I don't normally, work in kind of a DIY shop setting anymore. I can, I'm used to it, but I don't do it that often anymore. So I think that is creatively engaging in a different way. It engages new muscles and parts of the brain. So I hope you learned a thing. I hope you enjoyed the abject chaos. And now I highly suggest that you go check out Sam's video where you can see the full build, and you just hit that sub button over there, because Sam is a wonderful human being and I think she deserves your sub. So that's that. Now I'm going to go get on to the next thing. Friends, I hope you have a good one. I hope you get in the shop. I hope you go make a thing. And I hope you try to enjoy it as much as you can, whether you're alone or with friends, whether you are making something that is serious or making something that has no bearing on your career or creative practice whatsoever, and you're just enjoying the process. And regardless of what path you choose, I will see y'all next week. Cheers. I want you to paint me like one of your French bulldogs.
Sloppy and rushed.
Sloppy and Rush was my nickname
I
in
was
college.
gonna just say that. So, time for install.
That's how I won Best Dance Competition 2007.